With the Trump administration's drastic changes to U.S. national security strategy and its very role in the world. The document, which lays out U.S. foreign policy priorities, sounds a clear retreat, stating, quote, "The days of the U.S. propping up the entire world order like Atlas are over. The message to U.S. allies is that they, quote, must assume primary responsibility for their regions and contribute far more to our collective defense." One might say that means you, NATO, and Japan, and South Korea, and others. The American priorities in Ukraine now are to end the war fast and to make nice with Moscow, to, quote, reestablish strategic stability with Russia. Take note, for Israel and Saudi Arabia and others, the document says that America's reasons for focusing on the Middle East will recede. That's quite a change. And in an attempt to impose a MAGA agenda on Europe, the Trump administration warns Europe it must sharply reduce immigration or face, quote, civilizational erasure due to migration from non-European countries. Joining me now is General Wesley Clark. He is the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. And General Clark, I imagine your eyes were bulging to some degree as you read this document here. You commanded U.S. forces in Europe at a time when the American approach to the world was quite different than that which is laid out in this document here. What was your reaction to reading it? What does it mean?
First of all, I think it's very consistent with the actions and statements that the Trump administration has made. So I don't think there was any surprise in it. It is a transactional world. It's back to spheres of influence. It sacrifices the magic of America. For 250 years, America has lived the dream that we gave to all of mankind. And we were always a radical power. That is to say, we believed that others should share the benefits of democracy and liberty. And we acted to protect that. This is a retreat from the world, it seems to me. It's a smaller, weaker America. And Jim, I asked myself, why is it? Because somewhere in this document, it sort of indicates we can't afford it. But at the same time, the document is saying we're such a great, vibrant nation. We're so great. So why can't we afford this? Is it because we can't deal with our own fiscal responsibility that we demand tax cuts? There have been these three major tax cuts since 9/11 that have really sunk the United States into a difficult deficit position. Is that what this is about? And we're sacrificing 80 years of U.S. leadership, the rules-based international order, which has served us so well, and we're falling back into this sort of hemispheric, hands-up protective status. And, you know, when you look at it, you think, well, what about the dollar? Well, the administration wants to protect the dollar. Well, this is not the right way to do it. Well, what about the use of force in Latin America? Well, it doesn't seem like that's a problem for the administration. It's been tried in the past, never worked very well, hasn't worked in Haiti. It's not going to work in Venezuela. And here we are, we gave $20 billion to Argentina, but we can't afford to help Ukraine, a nation that's fighting for the very values that have made America great, and that will, if they succeed, will stabilize Europe. But we think Malay is more important. So, you know, I didn't find anything inconsistent with the actions of the administration, but seeing it in black and white and having it unravel like this, it's a big change. It's transformational, and it may pave the way for more.
Let me ask you, and perhaps relevant to that point, General Clark, I wonder how you think China and Russia read this statement. Do they find themselves emboldened to test, for instance, Europe further, or to test Taiwan, that the U.S., based on this document, would not consider Europe's security or Taiwan's security a priority to defend?
Well, I think you have to differentiate between Russia and China, even though they're in a sort of no holds, no limits alliance. But for Russia, they got to read this with a lot of glee. This is like the 28-point peace plan that was taken. They like it. Let's get the U.S. out of Europe. That's been the aim since Stalin and World War II. Khrushchev thought he could do it with putting missiles in Cuba. And so this goes a long way to helping Putin establish dominance over Europe, which is not in American interest. We fought 2 world wars to prevent a dictatorship from controlling Europe, and Europe is still our greatest investment partner and trade partner, as this document recognizes. So there's that inconsistency. With respect to China, my personal view, Jim, is that for years we've overinflated the threat of China. Yes, they've got a lot of military forces, but China is not Russia. China is not Putin. Putin wants that empire back. China has a bargain with its own citizenry. You submit to authoritarianism and we'll make you whole and wealthy. And so I think that the United States can work in Asia with China. I think that as long as Putin's in power in Europe, in Russia, we're going to have to be there in Europe and be strong.
Final question, if I can, because one particular part of the national security strategy has attracted particular attention because in it you have the U.S. in effect goading Europe to adapt a MAGA immigration policy, right? And it goes so far as to say that Europe faces, quote, civilizational erasure if it continues to allow migration specifically from non-European countries. And I'm aware of the tensions that large waves of immigration, you think from the Syrian war, have caused in Europe. But do you find that language about civilizational erasure, do you find that acceptable language, an acceptable goal for the U.S. to be identifying?
It's very rude language. You know, Russia should face civilizational erasure. It's never really lived up to its promise of democracy and so forth. It's a dictatorship. But in the document, we don't say that to Russia. We don't challenge China, even though they say the greatest threat to China is Western democratic values. Instead, we want to go after our dearest, longest allies. Why is that? Because I know there are supporters of the government in Washington who are in the data business, and Europe has different privacy laws. And I know there's frictions there, and some of these people supported J.D. Vance. And so I think there's some internal U.S. politics. But when it gets out into a national security strategy like this, I think it's offensive. I don't think it has any place in that strategy. And Europe does have to manage immigration. But Jim, I got to be honest with you. In 2013, 14, 15, when Europe was really suffering, I kept asking, why doesn't the United States let NATO help Europe dealing with these migrants coming over the Mediterranean and dying? Why won't we help? NATO could have helped. But, you know, this idea of detaching from Europe is not just from this administration. It's got some roots in it that go back a long way.
No question. Well, the first America First movement, as you know, well, was in the 1930s, prior to World War II. General Wesley Clark, thanks so much.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.